Hi, once these are objections to relativism. Now, unless I say otherwise, all these objections we're looking at are shared both by individual and cultural relativism. They both kind of have the same issues. There's one issue that cultural relativism has that individual relativism doesn't, and I'll flag that explicitly here. Okay, so one objection to both individual and cultural relativism is that our moral judgments or our culture's moral judgments are infallible. All right, what's that mean? The idea is that if our moral judgments are infallible, that means we can never be wrong about moral matters. All right. People typically think that at some points in their lives, they were probably wrong about some kind of moral matter. And that's the case because most people typically, over the course of their lifetime, change their views on things, right? And if you're fortunate enough to live up to your life at this point to never have changed any moral views ever, and you think that you're right about all your moral views, I guess good for you. That's really fortunate, maybe. But nonetheless, a lot of people tend to change their views on things, okay? Or if you never did, but you know people who have, okay? Why do people change their views on things? They change their views on things because they typically think that they were wrong about something in the past, all right? But if you're a relativist, you're strictly speaking never wrong about any moral matter ever, actually. Why? Because if you're an individual relativist, you think whatever is right or wrong is just what you think is right or wrong, right? So we typically don't think that our views are infallible like that, though, right? So for instance, suppose I thought at one point, and I'm just saying hypothetically, I'm not sharing my actual views on this. Hypothetically, let's just say at one point I thought that capital punishment was morally wrong, okay? And whatever my reasons were, it doesn't really matter, okay? Suppose then later in my life I changed my views to think that capital punishment is morally permissible, okay? If individual relativism is right, then in the past, capital punishment for me was actually morally wrong just because I thought so. And then all of a sudden later on in the future, it's actually okay for me because I thought so, all right? Now, how does that mean I'm infallible? Why does it mean I'm infallible? Well, because, strictly speaking, if whatever is right or wrong is just whatever I think is right or wrong, then if I change my mind, then it just is the case that it's right at one point and it's wrong at another point. That's really it, okay? But we don't think usually moral matters are like that. We don't think we're morally infallible. In fact, a lot of us typically think that we're really imperfect when it comes to moral matters. We get things wrong all the time, okay? That's what makes these conversations about ethical problems so not only contentious, but also important and complicated, right? It's because we get things wrong. We realize after reflection that we should change our views. In other words, we're not infallible. But if relativism's right, then we actually are. And that seems wrong. That doesn't seem correct, okay? On a cultural level, especially, you probably think this is true, right? So at one point, our culture thought it was morally permissible to enslave other human beings, okay? Strictly speaking, if cultural relativism is right, in the past, that wasn't actually wrong. In fact, it was totally morally okay because that society thought it was okay to do so, right? They weren't wrong at any point about the moral permissibility of slavery, right? They could do whatever they want to any population of people and be morally permissible because they thought so, okay? If cultural relativism is true, at least, that's a true statement, okay? Now, a lot of people think that's a false statement. A lot of people think, actually, no, in the past, it was morally wrong to enslave people, and it was always morally wrong to enslave people. They were mistaken, right? But the problem is that if you're a relativist, you have to say they're actually morally infallible. Why? Because again, if whatever is right or wrong is just based upon what your culture thinks, then it actually just was true that it was morally permissible to enslave other human beings, based upon their race, in America's history's case at least. It was just morally okay to do so, right? And there was nothing wrong with that, all right? But lots of people think there's something wrong with that and there was a mistake made, okay? If you think there was a mistake made in the past and that was morally wrong, you can't think that we're infallible, and consequently then that's a really big problem for relativism, okay? So that's one objection. Another objection is that it implies moral equivalence of our moral views. What's that mean? That means that all of our moral views are equally plausible, all right? So if individual relativism is true, if I think that it is morally permissible to kill innocent people, then it just is morally permissible for me. If you think it's morally wrong to kill innocent people, then it's morally wrong for you. But whatever is right or wrong is just a matter of what we think, right? There's no further reason or explanation needed, okay? So my view that it's morally okay to kill innocent people That would be just as good as your view that it's morally wrong to kill innocent people. That doesn't seem right though, right? The reason why is because it seems like we have very good reasons to think that it's morally wrong to kill innocent people, right? Way better reasons than to think that it's morally okay to, all right? So if you think we have way better reasons to think that it's morally wrong to kill innocent people than we have reasons to think it's morally okay to kill innocent people, then you can't think that the views are morally equivalent, right? Same thing with cultural relativism, right? When other societies in the past were starting to outlaw slavery because they thought that it was morally wrong to do so, and we were still engaging in the practice, it would be just as morally permissible for us to be engaging in slavery in the past than it would be for others to not engage in slavery. But we typically think we have lots of good reasons not to be engaging in slavery, among other reasons you might think that it violates human rights, okay? And you can have other reasons too, but that's one reason you might think. You might think the reason why it's wrong to have slaves is because you're violating people's rights, you're not respecting them as persons, whatever, okay? But again, those views would be equivalent because whatever is right or wrong is just based upon what a culture thinks. So that seems really problematic, okay? And so consequently, that might be another reason to reject relativism. This objection is particular to cultural relativism, and this one says that basically a culture's moral views are beyond criticism. Okay, why is that important? Well, cultural relativism is going to say that, again, actions are wrong just because they're endorsed by a culture. Why is that? What does that have to do with criticism? Well, the idea is just that if my culture, for instance, thinks that it's okay to have segregated schools, for instance, or to perpetuate racist policies, okay, and the majority of the people in the culture think that, then it just is the case that's morally right to perpetuate racist policies or have segregated schools, all right? That means that, consequently, if cultural relativism is true, the whole civil rights movement, when it was the minority opinion of the time, and when I say that, what I mean is that less than 50% of the population in America thought that it was morally right, or we had an obligation to desegregate schools, or we had a moral obligation to get rid of these racist policies. Strictly speaking, they would just be wrong, right? Why? Because the culture at the time thought it was okay. So any minority opinion that does not agree with the majority opinion would just automatically be wrong. And you can't criticize it either, right? You can't say, well, wait a second, hold on. The reason why maybe, for instance, you think that racist policies are objectionable is because you're treating other humans with less dignity and respect than they should be treated, based upon some arbitrary characteristic like skin color, okay? That seems like a really good criticism, right? I think a lot of people tend to think that's a reason why racist policies are problematic. Cultural relativism is going to say, well, hey, too bad, we just think it's okay to do so, and that's the end of it, right? So, sorry, I have something pop up on my screen here. Anyway, so cultural relativism is going to say, well, too bad, we think it's okay, and that's sort of the end of it, right? Because all this was going to be right or wrong just to say, for a culture, that they endorse it, all right? So any criticism by the non-majority group is just automatically incorrect, right? Because if they say segregation's immoral, well, no, it's not according to cultural relativism because the culture thinks it is morally permissible. And that seems problematic. We think we can criticize culture's moral views all the time, right? Think of Nazis. You can run the exact same thing, all right? So that's a problem. The final one is that there's no moral progress. It's kind of relates to this a little bit. So if you think we made any moral progress by getting rid of legal institutional slavery, and I think a lot of people did. I think a lot of people think that it's a step in the right direction, a good thing we got rid of slavery, then you can't think relativism is true. The reason why you can't think relativism is true is because, strictly speaking, you don't make moral progress if you're a relativist, right? You just have a change of views, but they're no better or worse. You might think, well, why? Well, because when we make progress on things, there has to be some sort of external standard we're comparing it to, right? So suppose you're losing weight, right? And you want to lose weight, all right? If you want to make progress in losing weight, you have some sort of outside standard that you're looking to. So you're saying like, okay, like suppose you weigh just like 300 pounds or something like that. Okay, you want to lose weight. Well, how do you know you lost weight? We have this outside standard where you have 300 pounds, and if you get below 300 pounds, you've lost weight. Okay, so you have an external standard there, all right? But relativists don't have that, right? There is no external moral standard outside of what you think or what your culture thinks, all right? So when our culture thought that it was morally permissible to enslave people based upon the color of their skin, then at the time, that was right for them. And then when eventually our culture shifted and had a change of opinion, now all of a sudden it's wrong, okay? But there wasn't any progress made. And the reason why, according to relativists, that no progress was made is because there's no other stand to be referring to here. It's just a change of opinion, right? Because strictly speaking, in the past that was right, and now it's not. But it's no better or worse for relativistic theories because in the past it just was okay, and now it's not. It's just a change. That's it. It's no better, it's no worse, it's just a change, okay? Because again, we don't have any external standard we're comparing things to. Because what could it possibly be if it's all just this internal stuff about what our culture